My name is Rosie Castro. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and in the year of 1947. I was born near Culebra and Zarzamora, and it was very close to Little Flower School. That's where I went to school for 12 years. Went to church 6 out of 7 days a week. I was at Little Flower Church and Little Flower Elementary, junior high, and high school. It no longer has a high school. But it was a very good opportunity because it was a small school. Our graduating class was about 26 people. Therefore, you had to make up what you wanted to do. It provided an opportunity to do a lot of leadership type things. Youth club, we started a youth club. But also my family, my mother had come from Mexico with her sister. Both of them had been orphaned when my mother was about 6 years old. She stayed with a family, and her sister was split up when they got to San Antonio. So they didn't get to live together. And I grew up in a household that was her cousin, Maria Garcia. And Maria had a daughter, actually, it was her niece, who, because her sister who had the child had died at childbirth. But we lived there near Little Flower, and with a very kind of a low income. My mother had only gone to about 3rd grade when she was here, and consequently, her options were limited in terms of work. She would babysit. She was a maid in many of the Alamo Heights area, Terrell Hills. And so I was very fortunate because my guardian, Maria Garcia, worked at Little Flower. And so I was able to go there for the 12 years. It was a kind of a strict childhood, both because of the Catholic faith, but also just Mexican upbringing. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. We used to go Christmas caroling on Christmas to the neighborhood. We did a lot of things. I had cousins, and all of us got together. Kids from the neighborhood got together. And so, you know, it was a happy childhood. Poor, but happy. I think that there's always been an element of some kind of involvement. In high school, you know, I helped to start the youth club. And then, of course, once I got to college, I went to Our Lady of the Lake University on a scholarship. And one of the first things we did there was to start a Young Democrats Club. But to start the Young Democrats, you had to start the Young Republicans because they didn't allow one without the other. So we helped start the Young Republicans as well. But besides the political aspects, you know, I had a very good mentor, Dr. Margaret Kramer, at Our Lady of the Lake. I was studying to be an educator, a teacher. I was concerned, I think, from early childhood because I could see the difference between the upbringing and the conditions of my community and the communities that my mother worked in. There was a vast difference, and I always had to ask myself why that was the case. It was obvious to me that Latinos were no less smart, were no less able to do just about what anybody could do, but we seemed to be pushed into those areas of town where the resources were just not there. And so I think from a very young age, I wondered why the inequities existed. That was also fostered by the fact that at times, the people that my mother worked for could really make statements about my mother that infuriated me. So that plus the fact that in a Catholic school, you always are taught the gospel. And that has a real element of social justice. And so I think that had a lot to do with formation of understanding that you had to be in community, that you had to try to ensure that there were equal opportunity for everyone in the community. I think that in college is where, you know, I think that you really come of age. For me anyway, that's where you discover a lot of things that you never got to see. For example, the history of Mexican Americans in the United States and in Texas. A lot of that I got to read for the first time in college. Also, one of the things that happened right away in college is that we were doing a study of the people who were running for governor that particular year. And there must have been 10, 15 people running in the Democratic field alone, because at that time, the Republicans did not control Texas, the Democratic Party did. The conservative Democratic Party did. But in doing that research, you know, I found that one of the things the state legislature did was that it put money, more resources into horses and cows and pigs and highways in Texas than it put into educating children. And I'll bet you if you look at it now, it's almost the same. It was obvious to me, as I'm coming out of high school, 80% of Latinos are not graduating high school. 4% of Latinos are actually in college. So I understand that I'm given an opportunity to be in college and that I've got to do something with it. And in that study of those people running for office, I came to realize that in the United States, if you want to make a change, if you want to impact the way people live, then you have to be politically involved. There's no other way. This is a country of laws. It's a country, a democratic country in which people are represented. And if you're not at the table, if you're not represented, you never get that change that you are working towards. So for me, that was a big realization. I had not been political up until, just did a little bit in high school, but really college was an eye-opening experience, and Dr. Kramer had a lot to do with it. She introduced me to all the local Democratic politicians, and at that time there were less than a handful of Latino politicians. But I got to meet them all. Besides my sons, I mean, I think that there have been things throughout my life. I think I was talking to a friend the other day, you know, it almost seems that every 10 years you kind of reinvented yourself. But this is the Latino collection here that we're in is one of the things that in the 90s many of us advocated for. It was a struggle at the time because the idea, it was a different director, a different board, a different everything, but the idea was, well, if you give Latinos a Latino collection, then the Jewish community wants theirs. They've already said the African American, and our thing was, why not? Let's do that because it's important to have diversity and to have the collection not only for young Latinos that need to see themselves reflected in books, but for other people that want to learn about Latinos or African Americans or Jewish or Sikhs or, you know, whatever. I really felt that this was a dream that for a long time had been Bryce, one of the former reporters for the Express News who had been on the library board, had brought forth the issue. They had not been able to do it. But one day a friend of mine and I came to listen to Sandra Cisneros, and she jokingly said that she was giving back her stipend that she was receiving that day for the Latino collection, which didn't exist, right? So at that point we said, you know what, this thing has to become a reality. So now you can see for a long time it kind of languished. Our current director, Ramiro, has really made this a reality, moving it down from the 6th floor. But I think this is one of the things that I long to see and that many people work towards having. I was very fortunate. At the lake, my mentor was a psychology professor, and I took a lot of courses that dealt with, I was an educator, so I took a lot of courses dealing with how you treat children. And early on, I really thought about how I wanted to raise my sons. One of the things, for example, was that I didn't believe in spanking them, and I didn't believe in anybody else doing it either. There were just kind of some precepts that I try to set and try to live by that I think help. I wanted to make sure that we could always communicate. To me, that was one of the biggest factors, because as children grow up, if they can't communicate with you, that's when you start to get the problems. So I try to set up an atmosphere where they could always feel free to tell me whatever they needed to tell me. I was fortunate because my mother was still alive, and she helped to raise them, actually, because after 8 years old, I was a single parent. And she told them a lot more than I did about our history and our family and and so that was very good. I just knew, as a single parent and as a woman, I wanted to make sure I could raise my sons in a manner where they would be respectful of all people, where they would be respectful of women, where they would be giving back to their community. And they did that very, very early. Julian used to tutor people for reading. Joaquin was always very involved with things like Lincoln Douglas debate, leadership programs, that kind of stuff. And also at Stanford, they tutored kids. I wanted to make sure that they felt that they had an obligation to give back to their community all the things that the community had given to them. The libraries were a big part of their life. That was our fun. I didn't have a car for a long time, and we didn't have a lot of funds. And so fun things were kind of, what didn't cost a whole lot. And so both myself and my mother would take them to the mobile libraries and to the bigger libraries, and reading for them was always fun. And that was another thing. I felt that reading is a key to a successful life. And so from very little, I got them magazines and whatever they were interested in. They were big wrestling people. And so, bought them wrestling magazines, things that would challenge their ability to read, because if they liked something, they would read it. They didn't get in trouble much. It's hard to remember anything that they really got in trouble for. They did silly things like, I think one year they had chicken pox or something, and they had just gotten over them, so they painted chicken pox on when they went out for Halloween and stuff. Or they couldn't go out yet, so they painted these chicken pox, and we stood and gave candy out. But they never really gave me any problems. The only thing I can think of, one that did upset me, I always harped on, be sure you tell me the truth. You can tell me anything. And so one day, they said, well, they were going to go. Could I drop them off? They wanted to see this movie. Okay. And so I don't know if I decided to go see another movie there or what, but I walk in and they're there with girls. There's this whole little group then they have girls there. And I'm like, okay, you didn't tell me that you were going to be out here with some girls and stuff. And they're, well, we just kind of saw them here. Yeah, right. And that was probably the worst that they ever did, was to hide from me that they had little girlfriends. They have some differences. One of the things early on was that Joaquin is a little bit more sports-oriented and better coordinated. Julian always liked reading and being at home. He's more of a homebody, although I don't think either one of them is at home much anymore, but because they're both always gone. But that was always one, the athleticism. They always competed athletically, but Joaquin always seemed to have a little bit of an edge on that, while Julian always did little bit better on studies and academic type of stuff. They're both were quiet and shy, but again, Joaquin always seemed to have an edge over Julian on being not as shy. So he would make the friends, and then they'd become Julian's friends too. Their reading, I think Julian always was into biographies and that kind of type of thing, history, whereas Joaquin likes short stories and essays, and he does the other two, but he really likes short. He'll always get that best short stories of the year, and essays and things like that. Joaquin likes film. Both of them are big movie people, but Joaquin particularly really enjoys the whole film area. It's kind of weird because both of them, of course, are married, and both of them had their first child was a girl, and then their second child was a boy. So both have two boys, a boy and a girl. But it's, you know, they're very similar, and now, of course, they have different friends and all of that, but it was always hard to see great big differences. And people always ask, well, you were political, is that what you wanted for them? No, I only wanted for them whatever would make them happy. And I think every parent, that's really what you want, is that, you know, they'd be safe, they'd be happy, and they'd be good people. So, I mean, whatever they decide, you know, whether Julian decides to run for president or Joaquin decides to run for governor or run for something else, that's fine with me. They know that I would always support them, whatever they decide to do. Now, at this part of my life, a lot of what I think about now is the grandchildren. You got to take care of them a lot. But, you know, they're young, and it's exciting to watch them develop and to wonder what will they be like. I asked the oldest, Karina, okay, Karina, you want to be president? She's no. And when she was little, she'd say, no, that's a boy thing. And so, you know, then we have to work hard at, no, it's not a boy thing. But, you know, I hope that whatever they do, they will always keep the sense that their mothers and fathers have of caring about their community and about giving back and trying to, both of them, I think, exemplify trying to help people get all the opportunities that they can, financially, in terms of housing, in terms of, you know, transportation, health. And that's what I hope the grandkids will do too. One of the things that is important, I think, is that I was very fortunate I had my mother. Not everybody has that, you know, they're single parents, they don't always have someone here that they can rely on. I think what's important is that people feel free, single parents feel free to look for resources and to ask for help. Because there are a lot of people that feel like I've got to do this all by myself, and you can't. One of the things that was very clear to me, that had it not been for extended family and my mother, and also for friends, I don't know that I could have made it. There were times when, you know, my sons were small, they were not big guys, and they wanted desperately to play football. I was able to go to a friend and say, you know, should I let them play in junior high? And he was able to tell me why or why not. I mean, I think you have to be able to reach out. You have to form a community that helps you to parent the kids. You know, the whole, it takes a village. It's now become cliche, but it's so true that especially for a single parent, you have to find a way to build that community. I think too that always watching who their friends are. I always like for their friends to come over so that I could see the interaction, so that I knew who those parents were of those kids, and that helped, you know. I think that there are a lot of resources, there are a lot of free things that can be done, and you have to look for them because it can get pretty tough. And I think, it's also, there's acts of faith that you have to not only believe in yourself, but believe in a higher power and hope that the kids understand that.